This is Shilpi, and so lovely to see all these people together. It is a reunion, of course, and if it hadn't been for the pandemic, our batch would have been celebrating 25 years of being in that wonderful place, right? So today's session is, of course, with Kavita, and my first memory of Kavita is really seeing her on that uh, June afternoon. Nono Bhai was probably giving us instructions for smudging with our toes, right? And Kavita walks up to me and she says, "तुम हिंदी में बात करनी थी." So we ended up doing what 17-year-olds do. We put each other in boxes, slapped labels onto each other, and I don't think we spoke all that much for the next 2-3 months. Um, but very soon, we peeled all those layers, we warmed up to each other, and thereon began this friendship, which went beyond an ID. And but that first impression of Kavita as a quintessential Mumbai girl has always stayed with me. She was, I still remember that knotted shirt, a Rangila style, her light blue denims, and that puchku, the pink troll, in her pocket. So that was Kavita for me. And of course, over the years, one just kept on discovering more and more about her. But extremely articulate, very, very vocal, passionately vocal about everything that she felt, for always questioning, that characteristic frown on her face, and that equally characteristic, smile, which she would break into very, very easily. And we were just talking about it before the session began. We did several things together. I mean, we've never collaborated, and I don't know why, but we've never collaborated otherwise outside with work. But while we were at NID, I think we were always doing a lot of stuff together. So I was listening to Ayaz the other day in the session, and he spoke about laser rec very fondly. So Bhupesh and Ayaz and Wasim, Raj, Reena, they all used to run the laser rec, and when there was that break, we used to sell the tea, and also ran Lyric, the book lending club, which had some very obnoxious titles that in that thing. So there was that, and of course the VC cheerleading team. So a lot of fond memories, with Kavita. But I think there was one thing which, and Partho was here. I remember Partho just making this comment very recently in our WhatsApp group, where Kavita had uh, put up this illustrated post on the death of the pregnant elephant in Kerala. And Partho said, this wasn't a side of you that I knew about. Um, and that's really, what Kavita has been. She's been the keeper of all these stories, the collector of all these stories, but it probably wasn't until very recently that she began to reveal them and live them, and make all those connections, which of all these experiences that she's collected in the past. Um, for me, I think this talk is also special because all the fantastic presentations and these conversations and stories that we've heard in the last few sessions have been about discovering their own selves, about setting their own processes, talking about their projects. There's lovely beautiful projects that they've worked on, how they've honed their craft, and of course stories of NID. But here's someone who's of course today going to be talking about the children's books that she makes, but also about somebody who's setting young minds onto this journey of discovering their own selves. And I think I've seen her discover her own self, find her voice with the students, really grow with her students. And that's really fantastic to see. So I've loved, watching her Insta grid grow. And today, of course, she's going to be sharing all of that with you. So yeah, I'm just going to begin this little chat with her. Kavita, if you can unmute yourself. Of late, you've been sharing a lot of stories about your Calcutta days, and it wasn't it struck me that we hadn't really spoken enough about that time. For me, it was always Mumbai. I've traveled to your home and I've been around Amma and Appa and eating copious quantities of that pudi kachal achar and everything. So very fond memories there, but very little that I know. I and I think everyone else knows very little about your time in Kolkata. Tell us a little more about that.
Shilpi, thank you for that absolutely glowing introduction. So now I can actually pass on to another dimension. So thank you so much. Calcutta was amazing. I was born there. I was there for the first 9 years of my life. And I was an absolute tomboy. सिर्फ चड्डी बनियान में घूमती थी. I
We
used to
saw that
read.
picture.
Huh?
We saw
So,
that picture. Yeah.
yeah, I was, for the longest time, I thought I was a boy. I spoke excellent Bengali and I bullied everybody. I was like the dada of the place. I was getting into fist fights with boys and pummel the shit out of them. So
That I can believe.
beautiful. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful time growing up, load shedding, eating rasgullas. I used to eat so much rasgullas that I had become a really, really fat kid when I came to Bombay. I would roll. I was like filled with rasgullas, and oh my god, that sweet tooth came from Calcutta, guys. You give me a kilo of rasgullas, I can go through it in seconds. I will not even share with my own daughter. So all that legacy from Cal.
Legacy from Cal. Right. And so then thereon you were largely in Mumbai, right? Your parents were there for the next few years. Yeah.
Yeah, forever. Then it was all Bombay and it
Then
became a
it was all Bombay.
proper Bombaya. In fact, Shilpi, I learned how to speak proper Hindi because of you and Reena. My Hindi was atrocious. I was like, Apun, aisa chalenga, aisa jayenge, that sort of awful, and I was ashamed of it. But मेरी वो जुबान ना साफ हुई because of speaking with you and Reena, and
हम
उसके
लोगों
पहले
ने भी थोड़ी बहुत अंग्रेजी तुमसे सीख ही ली in the process. Right. I'm not going to get into where you got to know about NID from and all of that, but just tell me what was your first impression when which you probably came back through the back gate. I mean, all of us did, right? Like, what was that journey for you from the station to this thing? What was that like when you saw NID campus for the very first time?
this is going to sound like a cliche because I think all of us have said it. I was 17. I grew up in Bombay in matchbox houses. There are no greens in Bombay. There are like just houses, okay? And I came in and I saw those horses and I saw the lawns. And yaar, मैंने more देखे यार. I mean, I know everybody said this, but one has to say it one more time. मैंने more देखे walking around. And and nobody had ever asked us questions like, clay mein aisa banao feelings, or cut cloth to make it look like a flower. I was like, I waited all my life for someone to ask me these things. um, and I am never going back to trigonometry or cutting up another frog ever again. You've tasted blood. I am coming here. These guys better take me. So it was like absolutely stunning. That
Do you
campus.
have any memories of the interview? Like, everyone has a interview story. Do you have any?
Yes, I do. There were these 8 very, very senior people, right from Setu to, I think, Raghu Anant and all of these people, and they quizzed me and they gave me this puzzle to solve. And I remember my hands were like shaking and I couldn't solve the puzzle. And then they said, calm down, try again. And then I tried and I could solve it. Yeah, I have memories. And you remember how all of us remember, right? The NID crowd here, what that interview room was like. It's like the lights behind the people who
The
are
panel.
the
Yeah.
band.
Yeah.
The lights on you. So you're seeing these big gray-haired silhouettes, and you're literally in the spotlight, and you can't make out their features. So it was just fun.
And there was a rumor that the man sitting in the middle was a psychoanalyst. So he just refused to speak. He would just like
Look
uh,
at you.
pierce you with his looks, but
So
refused to speak.
good. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
scary for a 16, 17-year-old to walk into. Yeah.
Right. Right. Um, would you have, I mean, of course, I've already said about our times together, but what else stands out for you at NID? Anything that you'd like to share here? I
What
mean,
was it?
tons of stuff, I'm sure. Who are your big crushes on the faculty, amongst the faculty? Tell me that.
They were such cute seniors. I mean, who would look at faculty? You remember, okay,
Yogi
and
Bangal?
some of these seniors are part of this group, so I'm not taking names, okay? But I'll let on this much. The foundation studio, across it was the PD studio. And I remember Shilpi Burman, you and I gazing longingly into that PD studio. Now I'm going to stop there.
Okay, okay, we shall do that. So of course, Nitesh is not here, but I remember during all our SLA classes, Tridip's classes, your hand would shot up first if it wasn't Sharma. There was always something that you guys were just squirming in your chairs, just wanting, itching to say something as soon as he stopped giving his lecture. Lots of ideas. And I do know that a lot of your work, both during NID and in the later years also, it had to do a lot with gender, social inclusion, health, and so on and so forth. How did you land up at Sony doing those promos for soap operas? Tell me that. That's something that I've never wrapped my head around.
It's exhausting when you're constantly working with rural health and you're only looking at that side of India. And I had just finished the most exhausting diploma project, which I spent a year on. When I was living in Gujarat, I felt terribly sick. I was defeated. I felt like nothing I could do would change anything. I mean,
I think
I had led a very protected existence till then, and I never looked at casteism in its face like I did in that village. There were separate wells for the Dalit community, and they couldn't cross over to the other side. And I just got exhausted. So I did what is characteristic, like run away. Let's do something completely the opposite. So I went and made promos for Sony Entertainment Television for 3 years. I cut
3 years,
promos.
was it?
I launched a lot of shows. I shot a lot of promos. I worked with Filmfare and Femina backstage. I did that for 3 years, and I then ran away from that as well because you can't. That's not me. But I learned a lot
Right.
doing that.
And is that when you came back to NID to teach?
Yeah, we all run back to mothership sometimes. Well, things get very crappy. It's like mothership. Let's go back. So I did run back to mothership and taught there for a long time. Yeah.
So I don't know whether it was around the same time that I probably came to meet you and other people at NID, or was it on another later trip? I really can't place that trip. I remember going to, you were certainly there, maybe Reena and Varsha were there too, and we said, chalo chalo Rasranjan chalte hain, because wahan pe to jakar khana zaruri hai and all of that. And we went there and it didn't quite taste the same, right? So that's a bit about something to say about nostalgia, right? You have these things in your head, like this is what this place is really about. But when you go back, things have changed. People have moved on. Everything changes. So what was it like going back after those 3 or 4 years of being away from NIT? And yeah.
The best thing about going back were the students. I'm a very practical person, and I never really put on nostalgic glasses ever when it comes to NID. And perhaps I'm one of the few people who's not crazy about Garba. Don't kill me, guys. I'm not. It's so overrated.
I have 2 left feet and some more.
Throw me out of this group because I said this. But the best thing about going back was learning from students, teaching along with SM, teaching along with Suresh. Incredible learning there. And you sort of realize that you sort of ran away from mothership, but you brought your shit along, right? So you can't run away really.
Right. But I think we've of course spoken about a lot of things. We continue to talk about everything from our compost bin to children to whatever, to books we love, to art we make, and then things which go wrong on an everyday basis. But I think some of our most meaningful conversations have also been around teaching, and this acute understanding that how we learned at NIT is not something that we can templatize and take forward, and it does not apply to all these situations that we have to adapt to. So the second I think, stint in teaching was at Srishti. And I think that's really changed a whole lot of things for you. Would you like to talk about that? Like what was, I mean, from this, I think for a whole lot of us, when we move from the NID to any other school, apart from, of course, the teaching and the learners, it's always about the space, right? It's always about what the space offered. The trees, the corridor, the expanse of the studios. And I think you and I have both worked in institutes which didn't offer us that, right? So what was it like to make those spaces your own? Yeah.
Srishti has been incredible. So I taught at Srishti for 4 years. I was leading a department there with a faculty colleague who's now associate dean. We created this department called Information Arts and Design from scratch. We wrote the entire curriculum. We had absolute freedom because our founder director, my ex-boss, Dr. Narayanan, saw that vision in both Shrivi and me. And Shrivi is an artist and a poet, and I'm an activist and a designer. So she just said, just do your work, choose your projects, figure out where you want to lead the students. And if you're able to deliver this project, you can create your own curriculum. So that sort of creative freedom was just incredible to start from scratch. And then now that's one of the most sought after departments at Srishti, and students feel about social design. I mean, yeah, and they feel as passionately about issues as I do, and I am so stoked about that we were able to create that space for students like me, like you, who felt that they wanted to effect change in some way. So to be able to create that, it didn't matter that we didn't have trees and spaces. We had the most amazing conversations with faculty colleagues, with students. We were redefining the boundaries of learning and thinking about how learning takes place and having such enriching conversations. I think that's what matters when you're a pedagogue. It's nice to have beautiful spaces too, and people chatting around. Yes, Shilpi,
Yes,
that's important too.
that, but yeah, one learns to live in boxes and create life outside boxes. And so I think I'm going to leave you with that, and yeah, bring on the presentation. Just waiting to see all the fantastic work.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to try and share screen now.
So just a quick one. Anuj was in interviews NID, so he sent a voice note which he wanted us to share. Just a quick one about it before you show your work.
Very late, end of first year, beginning of second year, or something like that. And then I spent the rest of my NID with these guys. Very straightforward. Kavita is super straightforward, very truthful. You could go to her with any problem and she would listen to you. A great listener. Very, very focused. She would finish her work pretty much in the classroom only. Like when everybody is like trying to take the work and come back home and thinking when they will finish it, she would have finished by then. Great cook. She made the yummiest dal rice. So I spent a lot of holidays eating food, and it was really yummy. I missed that dal still. Plus, she made these beautiful illustrations. I think always made me wonder why is she in film and video, but kahe time waste kar rahe ho? Because she had this storytelling ability. She had the way of putting text into those stories, just handwriting, and I had this very shitty handwriting. So for me, that this was like great, and I always believed in my heart that she would become an illustrator, and she should become an illustrator. So I'm very happy that she's pursuing that, sharing that knowledge with people. So thank you, Kavita, for being there in my life, and thank you for being the person you are, and big hug to you all.
Who is that?
That is Anuj from NID. He's doing interviews. So he said,
Anuj. Okay.
So over to you.
How? Thank you. Thank you, Anuj. I'm going to quickly share screen. Yeah. So all this crazy stuff that I've been up to, I call it Chiriawood, which is a really sweet game that all of us have played, Chiriawood, Hathiwood. So all my work comes under the banner of Chiriawood. So moving on. So yeah, like we spoke about a little bit. That's me, an absolute tomboy growing up in Calcutta. And to banker parents, both my parents were in RBI for the longest time, and extremely creative. Appa used to draw, and Amma used to do beadwork and crochet, juggle her full-time job as well as raise us and cook all from scratch. I inherited all that. I did not really inherited the banker genes. I'm terrified of stepping into a bank. I hate getting into banks. They scare the living daylights out of me. So for the longest time, Kanan and I, my elder brother, we would be taken to the salon and our hair would be cut short, like that, okay? Identical haircuts. So I had this till I was in 8th standard. So in school, I went to the school in Bombay, St. Columba. It was a girls' school. And in every play, I was the hero because I could remember my lines and I looked like a boy. So, and what quickly happened is that I had a little fan club of girls who would follow me around in corridors and look at me very lovingly. So I was like, oh my God, this is not happening. So I grew my hair in protest. That's Amma and Appa. They're in Pune now. And so that was a little bit about growing up in school. NID is just this. I learned so much at NID. It was truly a transformative experience. I remember someone talking, I think it was Vaibhav, where he was talking about how he completely transformed. My handwriting changed. It's like I had this boring, nondescript, cursive writing, and then it just became something else. It became distinctive. And they say that your handwriting only changes when there is an entire temporal shift happening. And that's what happened at NID. It felt like I had filters on and I was looking at this world through not perfect vision, but with courses with Tridip, where we were questioning images, we were questioning why certain messaging is offensive, why certain messaging is not inclusive. All that sort of opened a completely new dimension of looking at things. And such amazing seniors that I learned from. I would look at, I remember Shalini working on some brochure where there were oranges that she had shot, and then she was moving it pixel by pixel, and I would look on in fascination. I'm like, oh my God, that's focus. Or Reena would sort of, Reena was my roommate for 2 years, and we argued so much, and I learned so much from her. She actually showed me how to draw. So much learning happened outside of the classroom. I mean, that was incredible. And there's one interesting story about, I want to tell you about focus, okay? I missed my brother's wedding because I went to EP. Environmental perception is this course that you cannot repeat, right? I mean, there's no question. So I remember going to Aditi and saying, Aditi was foundation coordinator. Aditi, my brother's getting married and I can't go to EP. So Aditi, in her sing-song voice, told me, now listen, you have to prioritize. It's your brother's wedding or it's EP. EP will never happen again. It's either that, you go for your brother's wedding, and you take an entire year repeat. So I didn't go for my brother's wedding. I went to EP, and instead my brother and my bhabhi came to meet me at NID. So I'm talking about resolve and focus like that. And mostly I think I was really, really influenced by the works of Anand Patwardhan. That's when I decided that I had to be an activist. I thought I'd join NID and be a textile designer. I was like, no, that's not where I'm going. I want to create change. I want to be able to say things. And I was hugely influenced by the work of Chandita, the work of Anand Patwardhan. And that's the kind of cinema I wanted to make. So for my final project, I worked in this remote village in Gujarat for a year. And that's Lakhu Bain with the baby. And she's a Dalit woman. And this film changed the way I viewed the world. I was a city girl, and my parents had raised me in a very protected way, and they had never discussed caste with me. And I grew up in an agnostic home, and now I'm a full-blown atheist. So all this was, it's just, I hated it and I loved it. I didn't speak a word of Gujarati when I was in NID and for 4 years, but I learned to speak Gujarati in 3 months, because how else do you communicate? I would take a bath balanced on top of a Indian style potty, because everybody else bathed outside, but I didn't know how to do that. I was a city girl. I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. But one thing that this project, Lakhuben, did for me is it changed the way I viewed the world. It changed the kind of stories that I wanted to tell. It exhausted me so much that I went and joined television, which is like, what were you thinking, Kavita? But that, I made that work too. I worked as a promo producer and I launched shows. I did that for 3 years. I worked really hard. You know what working in Bombay is like. You work hard, you party hard, um, dance till 4 in the morning, go back to your edit shift. I got sick of all that and I went back to NID to teach. I was very young when I first started teaching. I think I was 24, and I taught postgrad students as well, who were, I think, approximately the same age as me. Um, that's me in the classroom, and that's Suresh's class. And I'm so incredibly blessed to have seen Suresh teach, seen SM teach. Suresh had this, and I'm very annoyed at Suresh. I remember this photograph, this moment very clearly. Suresh was going on and on about one of these stories, and we were trying to explain the value scale. And I was like, Suresh, what story is this? How is it relevant to the value scale? What's going on? And I didn't realize back then what Suresh was trying to teach us, teach me, also as a facilitator. I'll give you another small example. There was a student really stressed out, shoulders drooping. वो value scale नहीं हो रहा है, color wheel नहीं हो रहा है, तो सारा swatches he had gotten, and stood in front of Suresh like it's not happening. And then Suresh says, "What, yeah? What's the price of 1 kilo of aloo? You tell me that." And he was like, like what? How's that relevant? I mean, of course, the kid didn't say that, but those were the thoughts in my head. But I get it now. Suresh sort of knew that learning is going to happen. You're going to figure out how to make the value scale. But there's awareness of the world around you, which is important as well. SM would carry these little tracing sheets. He had these books bound specially. He would never mark a student's work. He would quickly whip his book out, and then he would put it over a student's work and make a quick little change. And that graphic form would transform into possibilities. And I would see the students' eyes just widen and say, oh yeah, I never saw it like that. So hugely influenced by these amazing people. Hugely influenced by these guys. Soumya in the picture, who's sitting there in that little vest, I've taught with her at Shrishti, and she's incredible. So yeah, I started teaching really early. Made a lot of mistakes. Sorry if any of you are here. Forgive me, I was learning. The biggest part of my work has been as a design educator. It's my calling. I'm happiest in a classroom. And you sort of know that you're still relevant and you're still making sense when kids make pictures of you and they remember you for good things. That's a little illustration that Shruti made. Shruti is in her second year now at NID. And I've taught babies. I've taught 6-year-olds, and I've taught postgrad students. I've also taught first year. I've been the happiest doing this, and I've learned so much with working both at NID as a teacher and then at Shrishti. In Shrishti, our final year projects are very different from NID. In NID, you're on your own, right? And you only have guide visits, which happen, I think, thrice. They used to happen over 6 months to 9 months. But in Shrishti, you run a studio. You're the studio head, and you have clients that you bring in. It's projects that you choose, you're passionate about, and then you have students who work as interns with you. So you are answerable for their projects. You're answerable for their learning. You're answerable to the clients. So that's the model that we follow in Shrishti. And I want to take you through a few exemplar works by some of my most amazing students. Some of them are here on this call with me. A big hi to you guys. Thank you for sharing your work being so generous and just like sending me stuff overnight. Um, One of the projects that we did, the first project that we did, was with the marginalized communities. Was one of the projects that we did. It was the Tibetans of Bailakuppe. Now, in 1959 was when the People's Liberation Army invaded Tibet, and the Dalai Lama fled. And with the Dalai Lama, a lot of people fled. And these are people, now the Tibetan diaspora is spread all over India. And Bailakuppe, which is in Karnataka, is the second largest settlement after Dharamshala. So we wanted to explore what home meant to these people. And this is the work of Malvika. She's, I think, on this call with us. And Mala made this beautiful book called Treasure from Tibet. Um, these are based on actual interviews with people, spending weeks on end talking to the first generation Tibetans, stories of how people left with just a few coins and a fistful of earth from their backyard. That's it. The story is about this old grandmother who gives that fistful of earth to her granddaughter. And there's conflict of identity among these people. They're displaced people. They're in limbo. They don't consider, a lot of them don't consider India their home. And this little girl goes and plants it in the backyard in Bailakuppe. So there's a story of continuity there. Um, Malvika did extensive research. This is something that we've stressed in our projects. It's not about walking into a community and appropriating their stories. You're merely taking oral histories of people and you're very, very carefully documenting them and telling them in a way that they can be heard and many more people can come to know about it. So we're very clear about that. So Malvika spent a lot of time in old age homes, in kindergarten, understanding what the first generation refugees thought about back home, what the third generation felt about being an Indian citizen, the kind of racial slurs that is still they're subjected to. So that was Malvika's book. Anukriti also made a book called Home, based on a real story of this girl who at the age of 7 was woken up in the middle of the night, put on top of a mule, and her mother said, bye, just go, and gave her some stale bread and said, listen, if you feel hungry, just eat snow, but be safe. So it's a story about a girl at the age of 7 who came over to Bailakuppe. I'm going to talk a little bit about Anya. Anya couldn't join us in this call. She's in Vancouver and it's 1:30 in the night and she's probably sleeping. Anya made this book called Portraits of Exile. Another exemplar student where she really wanted to figure out what it meant to recreate home. What is your idea of home? What kind of homes do you want to recreate? Is your home like the one you left back, or is it a new home? We were working with very young children who are not going to be articulate. So she created an entire toolkit of creating little homes. Her project is called Portraits of Exile, and it's 3 books based on 3 different stories of movement from Tibet to here. And each of them has a little book, has a little home that you can cut out and make, and it becomes a little home. Lot of tears through this project. I was the good cop. I was the one who would listen and hug these girls because it was difficult. The reality of the situation was so different from the beautiful pictures you see of Bailakuppe. There were people who were longing for home, people who were being discriminated against in India, and these stories had to be told to children. The client for this was Katha. Katha Books is our client, and Katha's published these books as well. I want to talk about Shrujana's work. We worked with the Siddhis of Mainali. The Siddhis are descendants of the Bantu tribe of Southeast Africa, and they were brought in by the Portuguese traders to work in the fields back then. And they've been bonded labor for the longest time. They're a scheduled tribe, and they're a very economically backward community, and they are discriminated against. And you know what racial slurs are being used against them. They make the most beautiful quilts, and their quilts are called the Kavandi. Shrujana made a book about Amu. Amu is a 6-year-old who really wants to stitch. It's an exuberant book. It has Amu jumping all over the pages, and it's for a 6-year-old. It's for very young children, but it talks about racism. It talks about bonded labor. And